Hello, everyone. Today, we'll talk about the Industrial Revolution and its impact on graphic design. Industrial Revolution, roughly the late 1700s through the mid 1800s, didn't just change factories and cities, but also changed how we see and communicate. This was the moment when graphic design began to separate from art and design, and started becoming a profession in its own right. We'll trace this shift from handmade to machine-made, from the scribe's quiet studio to the roar of the printing press, and see how design became the visual language of a modern industrial society. Before the machines, design was slow and intimate. Look here, the Book of Hours from around 1460. Every letter is hand-painted, every page unique. These were devotional objects, precise, private, and rare. Visual communication existed, but only for the elite. So when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we're really talking about how access to visual information, to books, posters, and ideas became democratized. Before we talk about design or typography, we need to understand the world that gave birth to them. Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about machines. It was about how people lived, worked, and thought. It changed everything. How goods were made, how cities were built, and how societies were structured. This was the moment when scientific knowledge met technology and turned into power. Knowledge no longer just explained the world, it built the world. At the heart of this transformation was the factory system, the idea that human labor could be organized like a machine. Instead of one craftsman making a product from start to finish, 100 workers each handled one small part. This division of labor sped up production, but it was stripped away the artistry and pride that came from handcraft. Work became repetitive, mechanical, and often dangerous. Yet, what it lost in individuality, it gained in scale. Goods that were once luxuries became affordable for ordinary people. This is where mass production began, and with it, a new kind of visual communication design to reach the masses. As industry grew, political power shifted. The old aristocracy, those who inherited land, began to lose influence. The new ruling class were industrialists and merchants, people who built fortunes from machines instead of titles. Cities swelled, with workers seeking opportunity. Urban populations exploded. London, Manchester, Liverpool all doubled or tripled within decades. The capitalist replaced the landowner as the most powerful figure in the Western world. And in a way, the story of modern design began right here, with people trying to make sense of life inside this new industrial city.
This channel often investigates the dreadful living conditions of the poor in history, and with population growth and industrialization in Britain's towns and cities, that focus naturally falls on slums. The journalists and philanthropists who provided us first-hand accounts of these notorious neighborhoods didn't varnish the truth of what they witnessed for the sensibilities of their audience, but perhaps didn't always go into as much detail about the extreme and harrowing squalor they saw, as much as the report you will hear today. Slums, or rookeries, are evocative of hellish urban poverty in the 19th century for us today, for good reason. Poorly constructed, overcrowded housing was characterized by gloomy, narrow streets and alleyways. They took on the no doubt unwelcome, to the poor whose home it was, sobriquet of rookery. This mocking the rook, being a bird that habitually nests in large colonies crammed into noisy treetops. They're often caricatured and mysterious and dark places, where journalists and cartographers feared to tread. But there were social commentators who sought to walk amongst the poor and highlight their lives and living conditions by publishing what they saw.
We just looked at the slum of London, and this is inevitable side effect of industrialization. It's easy to talk about progress in terms of machines and wealth, but this was also a time of exhaustion, disease, and inequality. 12 to 14-hour workdays, child labor, cramped housing, the darker side of progress. Factories ran on steam, but cities ran on human sweat. The industrial age promised abundance, but for many, it meant survival. This tension between progress and humanity is exactly the space graphic design was born into. Despite the social costs, innovation surged ahead. Steam and gas engines powered machines, and later electricity changed everything, from lighting streets to printing books. For the first time, people could travel faster than a horse could carry them. By train, by steamboat, distance began to collapse. Industrialization didn't just change how we lived, it changed what we saw. Cities grew brighter, faster, louder, and design had to respond to that visual chaos. As factories produced more goods, they also produced new need. Advertising, graphic design became the language of industrial capitalism, a bridge between product and public. When you have mass production, you need mass communication. The Industrial Revolution gave rise to newspapers, advertising, posters, and catalogs, all printed in massive quantities. Design became the voice of this new economy. Typography had to compete for attention on crowded streets and busy shop fronts. Critics at the time worried that society was losing its human values, but others saw this as the birth of a new kind of creativity, one shaped by speed, reproduction, and spectacle. The Tory Mill poster. So mass production changed everything. Like books, posters, and packaging could now be made in huge quantities. Design wasn't just for the elite anymore. just the way illuminated manuscripts were just for the elites and high class. It was everywhere, on streets, in shops, in homes. And this poster, particularly the Tory Mill poster, 1834, shows a new kind of boldness, heavy woodcuts, a strong contrast, fat face type. It had to shout above the noise of the city. If you were walking down a crowded 19th century street, what kind of design would make you stop and look? This kind of design, this kind of poster that just shouting at you. The printing press had existed for centuries, but industrial refinement made it unstoppable. Steam-powered presses could now print thousands of impressions a day. At the Great Exhibition of 1851, held in London's Crystal Palace, design and technology were displayed side by side, proof that industry could also produce beauty. It's no coincidence that this is when modern advertising was born. Here's where color enters the story. Chromolithography. I talked about chrome, color in Greek, and litho, meaning stone, graphy, graph, meaning drawing. So the color drawn on a stone, limestone. So chromolithography. A printing process using multiple stones allowed for vivid, layered color images. After centuries of black and white, people could finally see posters in brilliant hues. They sold everything from soap to travel dreams. Cheap paper and synthetic dyes made printing accessible to the working class, meaning everyone could own books, posters, or illustrated magazines. These are some examples of chromolithography posters and books. So Victorian graphic design. Why Victorian? So Queen Victorian era coincide with the Industrial Revolution. So it could be used interchangeably. Victorian era, Industrial Age, So Victorian graphic design, the characteristics of Victorian graphic design, you can interchangeably use as Industrial Revolution period graphic design characteristic. So it is ornate elaboration, outlandish and fantasy lettering, a time of huge technological advances in printing and chromolithography. Those are all characteristics of Victorian age, Industrial Revolution period. Graphic design. Victorian era adored ornaments. You see it everywhere, architecture, typography, even wallpaper. This was a reaction against industrial monotony. Machines made identical goods, but design gave them personality. This was also when illustrated children's books blossomed, a new audience for visual storytelling. That idea, that picture can teach, entertain, and connect remains at the heart of modern design. So here, industrial printing required uniformity. Metal type had to be standardized, reproducible, and interchangeable. Typefaces became products, printers could order them from catalogs, creating consistency across publications and brands. That consistency became the root of brand identity. You could recognize a product by its letters. Think of modern logos like Coca-Cola, IBM, FedEx. So each owes its clarity and recognizability to the 19th century logic. So this is a fat face, typeface, and it's a specimen. Let's just look at a little bit of examples from Victorian era advertising, graphic design. The children's book, poster, packaging, newspaper, magazine cover, magazine pages. And many of these are chronolithography. As I said earlier, it counteracts to that uniformity of industrialization products. The Singer, the sewing machine, the advertising for it. To moderners' eyes like us, it looks a little busy, loud, too much, but it has its own right. It has its own merit. It has its own, that light-hearted mood that it gives away. The Chief soap as a poster. Just lovely. A children's book. At that, before Industrial Revolution, Victorian era, children are just small version of people, like adults. They didn't really care for children's education, children's, well-being. It was the first awareness about children and children's education, and they realized that children need something different than adults. They're not just small version of adult. They are a different being who has different needs. So children's book, children's illustration, therefore, blossoming at this period. The examples endless. So I recommend you finish watching this on your own. There's a video linked on a Canvas, module 7. Okay, let's move on. So mass production flooded the market. Suddenly supply outpaced demand. So persuasion became essential. Graphic design turned into the language of persuasion. It told stories, created desire, sold dreams. Designers became translators between factory and customer, between production and imagination. With the industry came specialization. Printers needed skilled artists to handle lithography, typesetting, and layouts. Design became a profession. Schools, journals, and design theory began to appear. It's fascinating. The more mechanical production became, the more people sought to define what creativity really meant. This I would like all of us think about at the era of AI today. The Industrial Revolution gave us the DNA of modern design. Reproducibility, branding, visual hierarchy, and the marriage of art and technology. Even our digital design systems, templates, grids, interface are echoes of the industrial factory floor. We're still balancing efficiency with emotion, clarity with beauty. So what began as a technological revolution became a visual one. Design moved from the monastery to the marketplace, from devotion to desire. The Industrial Revolution didn't just mass produce goods, it mass produced meaning. And graphic design was the medium that made that meanings visible. Next week, we'll look at arts and crafts movement, a direct response to everything we've just seen. Industrial uniformity, mass production, and the longing for the handmade. That's it for now. Today, I'll see you next week.